I never thought this would happen to me. You always hear about it, friends talking about someone's cheating spouse or seeing it in movies, but you never think it will be your life, your pain. Yet here I am, standing in the middle of our bedroom, the one we built together, the one that held our memories, staring at undeniable proof that my husband has been unfaithful. My heart feels like it's being ripped apart, torn at the seams, bleeding, screaming. The text was still open on his phone, the words blurring through my tears. I can't wait to see you again. I miss your body. The text wasn't meant for me. No, it was meant for her. Some faceless woman who has taken what was mine, what I thought would always be mine. My hands trembled as I held his phone. I couldn't stop the sobs from escaping, couldn't stop the shaking that overtook my entire body. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the edge of the bed, the weight of betrayal crashing down on me like a tidal wave. This bed, our bed, now felt like a stranger's. Everything in this room, the pictures on the walls, the sheets we slept on, the pillows we shared, it all felt like a lie.
How long?
How long has he been doing this behind my back, smiling at me in the morning, kissing me goodbye as he left for work? How many times had he said he loved me, when in truth, he was saying the same thing to her? I couldn't breathe. I felt suffocated by the enormity of the situation, by the depth of my heartbreak.
Why?
The question echoed in my mind over and over again. Why would he do this? What was wrong with me? What wasn't I giving him that he felt the need to seek it somewhere else? A part of me wanted to throw the phone, to smash it against the wall and scream at the top of my lungs. But another part of me, the part that was still in shock, just sat there, frozen. I stared blankly at the text messages, rereading the words as if hoping they would change, as if somehow this could all be a mistake. But it wasn't. I heard the door open downstairs, the familiar sound of his keys jingling as he walked in. My heart dropped into my stomach. He was home. I could hear him calling my name, his voice cheerful, clueless to the storm waiting for him upstairs. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront him? Should I scream and demand answers? Or should I stay silent, pretend I didn't see anything and wait for the right moment to gather my thoughts? But no, I couldn't. I couldn't hold this in. I stood up, my legs shaky, and made my way downstairs. Each step felt heavy, as if I was walking toward the end of something. Of us. He was in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water when I walked in. His smile faded when he saw me. Noticing my tear-streaked face, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked, concern dripping from his voice. How dare he act like he cared? How dare he pretend that everything was fine? I couldn't speak at first. The words were stuck in my throat, my anger and pain so raw that they barely allowed me to breathe. But then I found my voice, cold and trembling. "Who is she?" His face paled. I watched the realization dawn on him, watched as he quickly tried to regain his composure. "What are you talking about?"
Don't lie to me, Mike.
I saw the text. "I know everything." My voice cracked as I said those last words, the truth of it breaking me all over again. He stood there, silent for a moment, his eyes wide with shock. I could see the panic in him, the way his hands gripped the counter like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Sarah, it's not what you think." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Not what I think? Really? Then what is it?"
Tell me, Mike.
"Please, tell me how telling another woman you miss her body isn't what I think it is." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. There was nothing he could say to fix this, nothing that could undo what he had done. The betrayal was there, real and undeniable, a chasm between us that could never be crossed again. "I trusted you," I whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I trusted you with everything I had, and this is how you repay me?" He looked away, guilt written all over his face. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I made a mistake." A mistake? I felt my anger rising, fury burning through my veins. "You don't accidentally cheat on your wife, Mike. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose to betray me." He moved toward me, but I stepped back, holding up my hand to stop him. I couldn't bear to be near him, couldn't stand the thought of his touch. "Don't. Don't come near me. I love you, Sarah, he said, his voice desperate, but it only made me feel sicker. The words felt hollow now, meaningless. How could he say he loved me when he had done this? I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, my voice barely a whisper. And in that moment, I realized that the man I had married, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger to me now. Everything we had, everything I thought we were, it was gone. Without another word, I turned and walked away, my heart shattering with each step. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what was next for me, but I knew one thing for sure. My life would never be the same again. The door slammed behind me as I stumbled out into the cold evening air, my chest heaving with sobs I couldn't control. I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to get away. The house, the memories, Mike's face. Everything inside those walls felt suffocating, toxic. I couldn't breathe. I walked down the street, my legs moving mechanically, numb from the weight of what had just happened. My mind raced, replaying the conversation over and over, each word a fresh stab in my heart. I love you, he'd said. How could he say that after what he had done? How could he look me in the eye and say those words while knowing he'd been with someone else? The betrayal felt like a physical wound, deep and gaping, one that I wasn't sure would ever heal. My entire life, everything I thought I knew, had been ripped apart in an instant. The life we had built together was now tainted, every happy memory shadowed by the knowledge that it was all a lie. I felt so lost, so completely and utterly lost. I kept walking until I reached the small park near our house. It was the place we used to go on lazy Sunday afternoons, back when things were simpler. I sank down onto one of the benches, wrapping my arms around myself as the evening breeze chilled me. Tears continued to stream down my face, unchecked.
I didn't care who saw me.
I was too broken to care about appearances now. I tried to understand it.
Why?
Why had he done this? What had changed? Was it me? Had I pushed him away somehow, without realizing it? Or was he just selfish, incapable of being faithful? The questions circled in my mind like vultures, tearing apart what little was left of my sanity. A memory flashed before me. Mike and I, sitting on this very bench, laughing about something silly, probably something trivial like a bad joke or a story about work. We had been happy. Or, at least, I thought we had. Now, it all felt like a distant dream, like that moment belonged to someone else's life. It was hard to believe that the man who had made me laugh, who had held my hand and promised to love me forever, was the same man who had just shattered my heart into a million pieces. I don't know how long I sat there, crying, lost in my own despair. Time seemed to blur. Minutes, hours, none of it mattered. The world outside felt irrelevant. All that existed was my pain. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me back to reality. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to explain. But when I saw the name on the screen, Emily, my best friend, I felt a surge of emotion. She was the only person I could talk to right now. The only person who would understand. I wiped my face as best I could, though I knew my voice would still betray me. Hello. My voice was hoarse, thick with the weight of my tears. Sarah? What's wrong? Are you okay? Emily's voice was full of concern, and just hearing her care made the dam break all over again. The sobs came back and I couldn't even get the words out. Hey, it's okay, she said softly. Whatever it is, I'm here. Just take your time. For a moment, all I could do was breathe, trying to steady myself enough to speak. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to choke out the words. He cheated on me. There was silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that's heavy, filled with shock and disbelief. I could almost hear Emily trying to process what I had just said. Mike, are you serious? I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I found the texts. He's been seeing someone else. I don't know how long. God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. Her voice was laced with anger, but also sadness.
Where are you?
I'm coming to get you. I'm at the park, I said, my voice small. The one near the house. I'll be there in 5 minutes, she said firmly, and then she hung up. I sat there, clutching my phone, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. I didn't want to be alone right now. Not anymore. The coldness of the night seeped into my bones, and I wrapped my arms around myself tighter, trying to hold myself together, physically and emotionally. But it felt impossible. How do you hold yourself together when everything that was supposed to anchor you is suddenly gone? Emily pulled up a few minutes later, her car coming to a screeching halt near the park entrance. She jumped out, rushing over to me, and without a word, pulled me into a tight hug. The moment her arms were around me, I broke down again, sobbing into her shoulder. She didn't say anything, just held me, letting me cry. After a while, when I finally managed to calm down enough to speak, we sat down on the bench together. Emily was quiet, waiting for me to talk when I was ready. That was one of the things I loved about her. She never pushed. She always knew exactly what I needed, even when I didn't. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, staring blankly ahead at the dark trees in front of us. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still you, Sarah," Emily said softly. "This doesn't change who you are. He's the one who messed up, not you." I nodded, but the words didn't feel true. How could I still be me when everything I thought I knew had crumbled around me? How could I be the same person after being betrayed like this? I don't understand. Why wasn't I enough? My voice cracked again, and fresh tears welled up in my eyes. What did I do wrong? Nothing. You didn't do anything wrong, Emily said firmly. This isn't about you. It's about him. He made the choice to cheat, Sarah. That's on him, not you. I knew she was right, logically. But emotionally? Emotionally, I couldn't stop blaming myself. Couldn't stop thinking about all the things I could have done differently. Maybe if I had been more attentive, or if I had been more affectionate, or if I had noticed the signs earlier. Emily sighed and squeezed my hand. You don't have to figure everything out right now. Just take it one step at a time. I'll help you through this, okay? You're not alone. I nodded, grateful for her support, but I still felt so lost. What was I supposed to do now? How could I go back to that house, to the life I shared with him, knowing what I knew? Do you want to stay at my place tonight? Emily asked gently. You don't have to go back there. The idea of walking back into that house, of seeing him again, made my stomach churn. I couldn't face him right now. I didn't know if I ever could. Yeah, I whispered. I don't want to go back. Not tonight. Emily nodded, and we stood up, walking back to her car. I glanced back at the park, at the memories we had made there, and felt a fresh wave of pain wash over me. How could everything change so quickly? How could one moment destroy everything? As we drove away, I stared out the window, the city lights blurring as my mind raced with thoughts of what my life would look like now. What would come next? Would I leave him? Could I forgive him? The questions were endless, and the answers seemed impossible to grasp. For now, I just needed to breathe, to survive this one night, and then I'd figure out the rest. I barely remember the drive to Emily's apartment. It was a blur of passing headlights and the low hum of the engine, but I was numb to it all. My mind was spinning, yet somehow completely blank at the same time. I stared out the window, the world passing by like a movie playing in slow motion, but none of it registered. All I could think about was Mike's face, the panic in his eyes when I confronted him, and the words he had said. I made a mistake. The words echoed in my head, over and over again, like a broken record. A mistake. As if his betrayal was some kind of accidental slip, like he had simply tripped and fallen into someone else's bed. The car came to a stop, and I blinked, realizing we had arrived at Emily's apartment complex. She parked the car and turned to me, her eyes full of worry. Come on, she said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. Let's get you inside. I nodded and followed her out of the car, my body moving on autopilot. Emily lived in a small, cozy apartment on the third floor of an older building. We had spent countless nights here together, girls' nights, movie marathons, sleepovers after long workdays. It had always felt like a second home to me, but tonight, it just felt like a temporary refuge from the storm that was my life. As we walked inside, the warmth of her apartment wrapped around me, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness I felt inside. Emily motioned for me to sit on the couch while she went into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came back with a mug of hot tea and handed it to me. I took it, cradling the warmth in my hands, though I didn't feel any more grounded. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked, sitting down next to me, her voice soft and careful. She knew me too well to push, but I could see the concern etched into her face. I hadn't said much during the drive, just bits and pieces of what had happened. I stared into the tea, watching the steam swirl up into the air, and for a moment, I considered keeping quiet. Maybe if I didn't say the words out loud, it wouldn't be real. But it was real. The weight of it was crushing me, and I couldn't carry it alone. I needed to get it out. "I don't know where to start," I whispered, my voice small. "I feel like my entire life just shattered. Like everything I thought I knew was a lie." Emily nodded, waiting for me to continue. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the tears were already forming again. "I found messages on his phone," I said, my voice cracking. "He's been seeing someone else. I don't know how long it's been going on, but it's real. It's happening." Emily's face tightened with anger, her hands balling into fists. "That son of a bitch," she muttered under her breath. "I can't believe he did this to you." I let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. "I can't believe it either. I didn't see it coming. I thought we were happy, you know? I thought he loved me." "He's a coward," Emily said fiercely. "A selfish, lying coward." I nodded, but it didn't bring me any comfort. All the anger in the world couldn't change what had happened. It couldn't undo the betrayal. "He said it was a mistake," I continued, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Like that makes it any better. Like it wasn't a conscious choice he made every time he saw her." Emily shook her head, disbelief in her eyes. "That's not a mistake, Sarah. That's a decision. A mistake is forgetting your keys, not betraying your wife." I felt a fresh wave of tears rising in my chest, and I put the mug down on the coffee table, afraid I might drop it. My hands were shaking again, the reality of it all crashing down on me once more. "I don't know what to do, I whispered, my voice breaking. "Do I leave him? Do I give him another chance? How do I even begin to move forward from this?" Emily sighed, her expression softening. "I wish I had an answer for you. I wish I could tell you what the right thing to do is, but I can't. Only you can decide that. But whatever you decide, I'll be here for you. You don't have to go through this alone." Her words were comforting, but they didn't make the decision any easier. How was I supposed to know what to do when everything inside me was torn in so many directions? Part of me wanted to leave him, to walk away and never look back. He had broken my trust in the worst possible way, and I wasn't sure I could ever forgive him for that. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, still remembered the love we once shared, wanted to fight for us. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe somehow we could fix this. But how do you fix something that's been broken so completely? The night dragged on, but sleep refused to come. I lay on the couch, wrapped in one of Emily's soft blankets, staring at the ceiling as my mind raced with thoughts of Mike. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the messages on his phone, the words he had sent to her, the betrayal that had unfolded before me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like a poison, seeping into every part of me. Emily had offered to let me sleep in her bed, but I had insisted on the couch. I needed space, needed to be alone with my thoughts, even if they were torturing me. She had eventually gone to bed, though I knew she was still awake, worrying about me. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours, my body exhausted but my mind refusing to shut down. Finally, I gave up and sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around me. The room was quiet, the only sound the occasional hum of the fridge from the kitchen. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost 3 a.m. Without thinking, I reached for my phone, staring at the dark screen for a moment before unlocking it. There were several missed calls from Mike, along with a string of text messages. "Mike, Sarah, please call me. Mike, I'm so sorry. I need to explain. Please don't shut me out. Mike, I love you, Sarah. Please, can we talk? My heart twisted as I read the messages. He was trying to reach me, trying to explain. But what was there to explain? The facts were already laid out in front of me. He had cheated.
He had betrayed me.
What more could he possibly say that would make any of it better? I thought about calling him, about hearing his voice, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't ready to face him yet. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I put the phone down and leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes for a moment. But just as I was about to drift into the fog of exhaustion, a new thought crept into my mind, a thought I had been avoiding.
Who was she?
Who was this woman he had been seeing behind my back? Was she someone I knew? Was she someone from his work? The questions started to pile up again, and suddenly, I felt a surge of anger, fresh and burning. I needed to know. I couldn't just let this remain a faceless betrayal. I needed to know who had taken my life, my husband, and destroyed everything. Without thinking, I reached for my phone again and opened Mike's messages. My hands shook as I scrolled through the texts, my heart pounding in my chest. There were no names mentioned, no direct references to who she was, but there were enough details for me to piece together that this wasn't just a random fling. This woman had been in his life for a while, long enough for them to share personal moments, long enough for him to crave her body, long enough for her to become a part of his world. And suddenly I felt sick again. I dropped the phone onto the couch and pressed my hands to my face, trying to block out the thoughts. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was an affair. An ongoing, deliberate affair. I felt like I was drowning in it all, the weight of it pulling me under again. But beneath the sadness, beneath the devastation, there was something else. Something darker. Rage. For the first time since I had found out, I felt pure, unfiltered rage. How dare he do this to me? How dare he lie to my face, betray me, and then try to act like it was just a mistake? How dare he try to salvage this mess while still protecting the truth about her? I deserved answers. I deserved to know who she was, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. The rage that had ignited in me wasn't going to be easily extinguished. As I sat there in Emily's quiet apartment, my body felt like a coiled spring, tense and ready to snap. I needed answers. I needed to know who she was, the woman who had invaded my life without me even knowing. How long had she been in his world? What did she look like? Did she know about me? The questions swirled around in my mind, pushing aside the devastation and sorrow. Now there was only anger. I picked up my phone again, staring at it like it held all the secrets I desperately needed. I knew Mike wasn't going to tell me willingly. He had already lied too many times. But there had to be a way to figure this out. I opened his texts once more, this time scanning through every single message, looking for any clues. Nothing was obvious, but something caught my eye: an address. A few weeks ago, he had sent her an address with a short message. "Can't wait to see you." It wasn't a place I recognized. It wasn't anywhere we had been together, and it wasn't close to his work either. My pulse quickened as I stared at the address, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave this Pandora's box unopened. But the stronger part of me, the part that was fueled by the betrayal, needed to know more. I needed to see with my own eyes where this affair had taken place. I stood up from the couch, pacing for a moment as I tried to calm myself. Emily was still asleep in the next room, and I didn't want to wake her. This was something I needed to do alone. 20 minutes later, I found myself driving through the dimly lit streets of our neighborhood, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The address wasn't far. It was only about a 10-minute drive from Emily's place. As I got closer, my stomach twisted in knots. What was I doing? Why was I doing this to myself? But it was too late to turn back now. I was already committed. When I finally pulled up to the address, I felt my heart drop. It was an apartment building, a small, modern complex with clean brickwork and large windows that reflected the streetlights. I parked across the street, my hands shaking as I turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the building, trying to wrap my head around what this place represented. This was where they met. This was where my husband had betrayed me. I couldn't go inside. I didn't even know which apartment was hers. But the fact that I was here, staring at the physical manifestation of their affair, made the whole thing more real than I had ever wanted it to be. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. I couldn't confront her tonight, couldn't knock on the door and demand answers. But now I had something, an address, a location, a piece of the puzzle that had been missing. And that somehow felt like a small victory. I knew where she was, and that gave me a sense of power, however fleeting it might be. I sat there for what felt like hours, lost in my thoughts, trying to process everything. Finally, when the tension became too much to bear, I started the car again and drove back to Emily's. I wasn't sure what I had expected to find at that apartment, but the fact that I had been there, that I had seen it, gave me a strange sense of closure, at least for the night. When I got back to Emily's, the apartment was still dark and quiet. I let myself in, careful not to wake her. As I collapsed back onto the couch, exhaustion finally hit me. My body was heavy, my mind drained from everything that had happened. For the first time in what felt like days, sleep finally came, pulling me under like a wave. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window, the morning light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The soft comfort of Emily's couch felt foreign, and the events of the night before seemed like a distant nightmare. But reality hit me hard as soon as I fully opened my eyes. It wasn't a dream. It was real, too real. I sat up slowly, my body aching from the tension and lack of sleep. Emily was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked up as I walked in, her expression full of concern. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice gentle. I shrugged, not really knowing how to answer that question. Numb, I guess.
Angry.
Tired. Emily nodded, understanding without pressing for more. "Do you want to talk about it? What you did last night?" I hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from her. I went to her apartment. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. I could see the surprise on her face, though she tried to hide it. "I found an address in Mike's phone." I continued, my voice flat. "I don't know why, but I needed to see it, to see where it happened." Emily let out a small sigh and reached across the table to take my hand. "And did it help?" I thought about that for a moment. Did it help? In some strange way, it had. It didn't change anything, but it had given me something concrete, something to hold on to in the midst of all the chaos. "I think it did," I admitted. "I needed to know that this was real, that I wasn't imagining it." Emily squeezed my hand. "I get it. Sometimes you need the truth, no matter how much it hurts." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. I wasn't sure what my next step was, but at least I knew I wasn't alone. Emily would be there for me, no matter what happened. We sat there in silence for a while, sipping coffee and staring out the window. The morning was peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I still didn't know what to do about Mike. Didn't know if I could ever forgive him. But for now, I just needed to take things one step at a time. Later that day, as I sat on the couch scrolling mindlessly through my phone, another message from Mike came through. I had been ignoring most of his texts, but this one was different. "Mike, I know I hurt you, Sarah. I know I can't undo what I did.
But I need to talk to you.
Face to face. Please, can you meet me somewhere?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. A part of me wanted to ignore him, to shut him out completely. But another part of me, the part that was still searching for closure, knew that I needed to hear him out. I needed to see him, to understand why he had done this. Whether or not I could forgive him, I didn't know. But I couldn't run from this forever. Taking a deep breath, I typed out a response. "Okay, we can meet, but I'm not promising anything." His reply came almost instantly. "Mike, thank you. I'll pick you up at 5? I hesitated, then sent a quick reply. "I'll meet you at the coffee shop on Main instead." I wasn't ready to be alone with him. Not in a car, not in our house. Meeting in public felt safer, like there would be some invisible barrier between us, something to keep me from breaking down. The hours passed slowly as I waited for 5 p.m. to come. I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts were consumed with what I was going to say, how I was going to face him without falling apart. When the time finally came, Emily offered to drive me to the coffee shop, but I declined. I needed to do this alone. I arrived at the small cafe a few minutes early, my heart pounding as I walked inside. The place was quiet, only a few people sitting at the tables with their laptops or books. I found a seat near the window, my back stiff as I waited for Mike to arrive. When the door opened and I saw him walk in, my stomach twisted into knots. He looked different, tired. His usually confident stride was slower, his face drawn with guilt and exhaustion. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on me, he hesitated, his expression pained. He walked over and sat down across from me, his hands fidgeting on the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was thick, suffocating. "Thank you for meeting me," he said finally, his voice low and hesitant. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. "I know you hate me right now," he continued, his eyes full of regret. "And I don't blame you. I hate myself too." His words hung in the air, but they didn't ease the anger still simmering inside me. I needed more than apologies. I needed answers. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you do it?" Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I have a good answer for that, Sarah. It was a mistake, a huge, terrible mistake. I was feeling lost, and I let myself do something I'll regret for the rest of my life." I shook my head, the anger bubbling up again. "That's not enough, Mike. Feeling lost isn't an excuse. You didn't just accidentally fall into an affair. You chose this. You chose her." "I know," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I know I did. And I wish I could take it back, but I can't. All I can do now is tell you the truth, as much as it hurts." "Then tell me," I said, my voice sharp. "Who is she?" Mike's eyes darted away from mine, a flash of hesitation crossing his face. I could see the internal battle playing out in him, the urge to protect himself, to downplay the truth, versus the realization that nothing could be hidden anymore. But I wasn't going to let him get away with anything less than the full truth. I deserve that much, at least. "Her name is Claire," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The name hung in the air between us, heavy and unfamiliar.
Claire.
I didn't know anyone named Claire. I had feared she might be someone I recognized, someone from our circle of friends or his workplace, but this was a stranger to me, and somehow that made it worse. She was an outsider, someone who had slipped into our lives without me even knowing. "How did it start?" I asked, my voice calm, though my insides felt like they were twisting into knots. Mike let out a long, slow breath, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the confession was dragging him down. "It started at work," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "She's in marketing for one of our clients. We worked on a project together a few months ago. It was nothing at first, just business, you know? But then we started talking more and, I don't know. I guess I let things go too far." "You guess?" My voice cracked, the anger bubbling up again. "Mike, you didn't just let things happen. You made a choice. Every step of the way, you made a choice." "I know," he said quickly, his eyes pleading. "I know I did. And I wish I could undo it. God, Sarah, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did." I snapped, my anger spilling over. "You hurt me in the worst way possible. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and now you expect me to just what? Forgive you, because you feel guilty." "No," he said, shaking his head, his voice breaking. "I don't expect forgiveness. I
don't know what I expect."
just needed you to know the truth." I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth. The truth was that he had fallen for another woman, right under my nose, and I had been blind to it all. I had been living in a fantasy, while he had been carrying on this secret life. Every late-night work meeting, every unexplained text, every distant look, I had excused them all. And now I was paying the price. "Is it still happening?" I asked, my voice quiet now, drained of energy. "Are you still seeing her?" Mike looked down at the table, his hands clenched tightly together. The silence stretched on for too long, and my heart dropped into my stomach. "I ended it," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "A few days before you found out. I knew it was wrong, Sarah. I knew I had to stop. But I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to lose you. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So, you stopped only because you got caught. That's what you're saying. No, he said quickly, his eyes wide with desperation. I swear, it wasn't like that. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. Tell me what, Mike? That you were in love with someone else? That you were sleeping with her behind my back? What exactly were you planning to say? My voice was rising, the emotions I had tried to keep under control finally breaking free. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it was all pouring out of me now, and I couldn't stop it. I was going to tell you that I made a mistake, he said, his voice cracking. That I love you, Sarah. Not her. I never loved her. I scoffed, wiping at the angry tears that had begun to spill down my cheeks. And I'm supposed to believe that? After everything? After you've been lying to me for God knows how long. I'm not asking you to believe me, he said, his voice low, full of defeat. I know I've lost your trust. I know I screwed everything up. But I can't lose you. Please, Sarah, don't let this be the end of us. I stared at him, my heart aching with the weight of his words. Don't let this be the end of us. But what was left of us? The man I had trusted, the man I had built a life with, was sitting in front of me, asking for another chance, but I didn't even recognize him anymore. The love I thought we had it been real, or had it all been a lie? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I couldn't sit here any longer. I couldn't listen to him beg for forgiveness when all I felt was pain. I need time, I said, my voice shaking. I can't do this right now. Mike stood up too, his eyes full of panic. Please, Sarah, don't walk away. We can fix this. I know we can. But I was already walking toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I knew I'd break. I pushed open the door of the cafe and stepped out into the cool evening air, the breeze hitting my face like a slap. I could hear Mike calling after me, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of blood in my ears. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed at Emily's, unable to face the empty house that was now just a reminder of everything that had been shattered. Emily had been a rock for me, offering support without pushing me to talk about Mike or the future. She knew I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. I was still trying to figure out how to breathe, how to exist in this new world where everything I thought I knew was wrong. Mike texted me constantly, leaving voice messages that I didn't have the strength to listen to. Every time my phone buzzed with his name on the screen, I felt a pang of something between guilt and anger. I knew he was sorry, but his apologies felt like salt in an open wound. A week passed, then two. I hadn't seen him since the night at the cafe. I hadn't spoken to him. And though I hadn't made any official decisions about our marriage, the distance between us felt like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. The longer I stayed away, the more impossible it seemed to ever go back to the way things were. One morning, as I sat at Emily's kitchen table, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, a message came through from Mike that made my heart skip a beat. Mike, I'm leaving for a few days. I think we both need space. Take the house. I'll stay with my brother. I love you, Sarah. I'll be waiting when you're ready to talk. I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring in front of me. He was leaving. He was giving me space. But the part that hit me the hardest was the last line. I'll be waiting when you're ready to talk. Would I ever be ready to talk? I didn't know. I couldn't see past the pain that still gripped me, the betrayal that felt like it had burned a permanent scar on my heart. I couldn't see a future with him, but I also couldn't fully imagine one without him. The confusion, the anger, the sadness, it all tangled together in my chest, making it impossible to think clearly. Emily walked into the kitchen, her eyes going straight to me as she noticed the expression on my face. What's up? She asked, sitting down across from me with her morning coffee. Mike's leaving for a few days, I said quietly, still staring at the message. He says he's giving me space. Emily nodded slowly, her face carefully neutral. She didn't want to push, but I could tell she was waiting for me to say more. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice small. I thought space would help, but it's not. I feel like I'm still stuck in the same place I was the day I found out. I can't stop thinking about it, about him, about her. Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't have to figure everything out right now.
Take it day by day.
No one's expecting you to make a decision overnight. I nodded, grateful for her understanding, but I still felt so lost. How long could I go on like this? How long could I keep avoiding the inevitable? Later that afternoon, I found myself standing outside my house, our house, staring at the front door. Mike wasn't there. He had already left. The driveway was empty, the house eerily quiet. I hadn't been back since the night I had left, and now, standing here, the weight of everything hit me all over again. I hesitated for a moment before finally unlocking the door and stepping inside. The familiar scent of home greeted me, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stranger's house, a place that had been tainted by lies and deceit. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, they were all exactly as I had left them, but now they felt different. Everything felt different. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped in the doorway, my heart tightening in my chest. This was the place where we had shared so many intimate moments, where we had laughed and loved and slept side by side. And now, it was the place that felt the most like a graveyard for our marriage. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my fingers brushing against the soft sheets. How many nights had he come home after being with her, pretending like everything was fine? How many times had I trusted him, had believed in him, while he was betraying me? The anger surged up again, hot and fierce. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room, trying to calm myself. But it was no use. The hurt was too deep, the betrayal too raw. I couldn't stay here. Not now. Not yet. Grabbing my bag, I turned and walked out of the house, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. As the door closed behind me, it felt like I was shutting out more than just the physical space of our home. I was closing off the life I had shared with Mike, at least for the time being. Walking away from that house, our house, felt like a symbolic step, but it also felt like a failure. I had loved him so deeply, trusted him so fully, and now I didn't even recognize the person he had become. But more than that, I didn't recognize me anymore. I wasn't the woman who had stood by him, the wife who had believed in him with every fiber of her being. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I barely understood. I drove aimlessly after leaving the house, the city blurring around me as I tried to clear my mind. The anger had been my constant companion over the last few days, but beneath it, there was a deeper, darker sadness that I was afraid to confront. It felt too big, too overwhelming. I wasn't ready to face that grief head-on yet. Finally, I pulled over into a quiet parking lot near the park we used to walk through on weekends. I remembered us holding hands, laughing about something stupid, so secure in our little world. That world felt like a distant memory now, a place I could never return to. The sky was overcast, a dull gray that matched my mood perfectly. I got out of the car and walked toward the park, my feet carrying me automatically toward the bench where we used to sit. It was empty now, of course, just like everything else. I sat down, letting the cool October air wash over me as I tried to make sense of my thoughts. What do I do now? That question had been haunting me for days, and every time I thought I was close to an answer, the ground shifted beneath me again. I couldn't stay in this limbo forever, torn between anger and heartbreak, between the life I thought I knew and the reality that had been thrust upon me. But every time I tried to imagine my life without Mike, without the future we had planned together, I felt hollow. There was no joy in that vision, no relief, just more emptiness. A part of me still clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, we could fix this, that we could somehow find a way back to each other. But that part of me was getting smaller by the day, shrinking under the weight of the betrayal. I knew that even if we could repair the damage, things would never be the same. How could they be? How do you rebuild trust when it's been shattered so completely? As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another message from Mike, but instead, it was an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. Normally, I wouldn't answer an unknown call, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe intuition, compelled me to swipe the screen. Hello. My voice came out tentative, unsure. Is this Sarah? A woman's voice asked on the other end of the line. Her tone was calm, but there was a nervous edge to it, like she wasn't sure how this conversation would go. Yes, this is Sarah. Who's this? My heart was racing now, my mind jumping to the worst possible conclusions. There was a long pause, and then she spoke again. My name is Claire. I think we need to talk.
Claire.
The name hit me like a punch to the gut. The woman. The other woman. Suddenly, the air around me felt too thick, and I struggled to breathe. My hand tightened around the phone, and for a second, I considered hanging up. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want to know anything about her. But I stayed on the line, frozen in place by a morbid curiosity that I couldn't shake. What do you want? I managed to choke out, my voice tight with barely controlled anger. I'm sorry to call you like this, she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. But I didn't know how else to reach you. I think you deserve to hear the truth. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. The truth? You think I don't already know the truth? You slept with my husband. What more is there to say? There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then she spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. I know. And I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much, but I am. I didn't know he was married. Not at first. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Not at first? What did that even mean? You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything, Claire said quickly. But it's the truth. When we first started seeing each other, he never told me he was married. He made it seem like he was available, like there was no one else. I closed my eyes, trying to process her words. Could it be true? Had Mike hidden me from her the way he had hidden her from me? It didn't make what they did any less painful, but it added a new layer to the betrayal. If she had truly been in the dark at the beginning, then she was a victim of his lies, too. But that didn't absolve her. Not entirely. And when did you find out? I asked, my voice cold. About a month ago, Claire admitted. He started acting distant, and I got suspicious. I did some digging, and that's when I found out about you. I confronted him, and he tried to explain. But it was too late. I knew I couldn't keep seeing him after that. A month. A whole month she had known. That meant she had continued seeing him for a while, knowing he was married, knowing I existed. My anger flared up again, sharp and bitter. So, you found out he was married, and you still stayed with him. For a whole month. I didn't stay with him, Claire said quickly. I ended it as soon as I knew. I'm not trying to make excuses. I know what we did was wrong, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I wanted you to know that it's over. And that I'm sorry. The word sorry felt like a slap in the face. What did that word even mean at this point? What good was an apology when the damage was already done? Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. What do you want from me? I don't want anything from you, she said quietly. I don't know. Maybe I wanted to clear my conscience. Maybe I wanted you to know that he's not the man you think he is. I clenched my teeth, my knuckles white from gripping the phone so tightly. I already know that. You don't need to tell me. I'm sorry, she whispered again, her voice barely audible. I wish I had known. I never would have gotten involved if I'd known. The conversation felt surreal, like I was watching it play out from somewhere outside my body. I didn't want to hear any more. I didn't want to talk to her. But a part of me, a small, dark part, was relieved to hear her say that it was over, that she wasn't going to be a shadow in my marriage anymore. I have to go, I said abruptly, cutting the conversation short. I couldn't take any more of this. Don't call me again. Okay, Claire said softly. Goodbye, Sarah. I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind reeling from the conversation.
Claire.
The woman who had been at the center of my marriage's destruction. She had sounded remorseful, but that didn't change what she had done. It didn't change the fact that my world had been torn apart. But hearing her voice, hearing the truth from her side, had given me something I hadn't expected. Closure. At least a part of it. Now that I knew it was over between them, I felt a small, Fleeting sense of relief. Not enough to heal the wound, but enough to dull the sharpest edges of the pain. I didn't tell Emily about the phone call with Claire. Not right away, at least. I wasn't ready to talk about it. It felt too fresh, too raw. Instead, I spent the rest of the day lost in my own thoughts, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. That night, as I lay in bed at Emily's apartment, I found myself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind was still racing, still trying to make sense of everything. The anger that had consumed me over the past few days had shifted into something else, something more complicated. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was confusion, sadness, grief. Grief for the marriage I thought I had, for the man I thought Mike was. I had been so sure of our love, so sure that we were solid, unbreakable. And now, everything was in pieces, scattered around me like shards of glass. The next morning, I woke up to another text from Mike. This one was different, though. It wasn't an apology or a plea for forgiveness. It was just 3 simple words. Mike, I miss you. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart aching. I missed him too, in a way. I missed the life we had before everything fell apart. I missed the comfort of being with him, the way we fit together so naturally. But I didn't miss the lies. I didn't miss the betrayal. And I wasn't sure if I could ever separate the two. The days passed slowly, each one blending into the next. Mike stayed away, giving me the space I had asked for, and I stayed at Emily's, trying to piece together what my life looked like now. I had avoided making any concrete decisions, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. At some point, I would have to figure out what came next. One evening, as I sat on the couch, Emily walked in, a thoughtful expression on her face. I've been thinking, she said, sitting down next to me. Maybe you should get away for a bit. Clear your head. I looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, take a break. Get out of the city. Go somewhere quiet where you can just think. You've been through a lot, and you deserve some time to figure things out without all this hanging over you. The idea sounded tempting. I hadn't had a moment to truly breathe since the night I had found out about the affair. Maybe getting away, putting some distance between myself and everything, was exactly what I needed. Where would I go? I asked, a small spark of hope lighting up inside me. Emily smiled. My parents have a cabin by the lake. It's peaceful, quiet, exactly what you need right now. You can stay there for as long as you want. No pressure. The thought of escaping to a quiet cabin by the lake sounded like a dream. A chance to be alone with my thoughts, to figure out what I really wanted, without the constant reminders of what I had lost. Maybe I will, I said, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Maybe that's exactly what I need. A few days later, I found myself driving out of the city, the weight on my shoulders lifting slightly as the miles between me and everything that had happened grew. The air was crisp and clean, and the trees lining the road were just starting to change color, their leaves turning shades of red and gold. It was beautiful, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, I felt a small sense of peace. Emily's parents' cabin was nestled by a quiet lake, surrounded by thick woods. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. As soon as I stepped out of the car and breathed in the fresh, cool air, I knew I had made the right choice. The cabin itself was small but cozy, with wooden beams and a fireplace that made it feel like a retreat from the world. I spent the first day just exploring the area, walking along the edge of the lake and letting the quiet seep into my bones. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I wasn't trying to avoid the pain or distract myself from the heartbreak. I was just being. That night, as I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket and staring out at the stars, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't healed, not by a long shot, but I was starting to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about learning to live with it, to carry the pain without letting it consume me. I still didn't know what the future held. Still didn't know if I could forgive Mike, or if our marriage could be salvaged. But for now, I didn't need to know. For now, it was enough to be here, in this quiet place, with nothing but the sound of the wind in the trees and the stars above me. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt like I might be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Someday, I would find my way back to myself.